Okay, so let's be honest for a second. I think it's safe to say we're all pretty busy these days, right? Work, family, errands, and somehow trying to squeeze in, actually living life on top of all of that.
It never ends, does it?
It really doesn't. And, sometimes it feels like with everything going on, the things that end up on the back burner are those things that are actually the most important. Things like our health and finances.
It's so easy to let those things slide when you're feeling overwhelmed.
It is. You're just trying to keep all the balls in the air. But the funny thing is, the source material for this deep dive points out this interesting connection between health and finances. And it makes me think maybe we shouldn't be thinking of them as separate things we need to balance, like it's a constant tug of war.
That's a great point. The source material really emphasizes that our health and finances are actually deeply intertwined. It's not just about willpower or finding more hours in the day.
So it's more like if one is off kilter, the other is probably going to be affected too.
Exactly. It's almost like a domino effect. Let's say you're stressed about money. So what do? You skip the gym and order takeout because it's easier and maybe feels like a little treat, a little comfort. But then over time, those unhealthy choices can lead to health problems, maybe even unexpected medical bills. And what happens then? More financial stress.
You end up right back where you started, only worse off. It's like a vicious cycle. So how do we break free from that cycle?
Well, that's where this deep dive gets really interesting. The source material takes a very practical approach, focusing on small, achievable wins instead of those big, overwhelming overhauls that most of us just never get around to.
Okay, that's music to my ears. Small wins, I can handle that.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Well, let's start with the money side of things. One of the first tips the source material highlights is automating your savings.
I have to admit, whenever I hear automate your savings, I kind of tune out. It always seemed a little intimidating. Like,
Yeah.
where do you even start with that? And what if you don't have a ton of money to save every month?
And that's where the beauty of automation comes in. You can literally start with a tiny amount, even $50 a month. The point is to make it effortless.
So rather than relying on willpower to remember to transfer money to savings, you're setting up a system that does it for you, no matter how busy or stressed you are.
Precisely. The source material actually talks about the psychology behind it. By setting up automatic transfers, you're essentially tricking your brain into making saving a habit. You don't even see that money leaving your checking account, so you don't feel deprived.
It's like that saying, pay yourself first. Except in this case, you're automating your future self to get paid.
I like that, automating your future self. I might have to steal that one.
Go for it. So automation is key. What else does the source recommend?
Another big one is tracking your spending. I know, it sounds a bit tedious, but trust me on this one.
I have tried those budgeting apps before, and it's always a bit of a shock to see where your money actually goes. It's like opening Pandora's box of takeout orders and impulse buys.
It can be eye-opening, but that's exactly the point. The source material argues that the real value of tracking your spending isn't about, punishing yourself or feeling guilty. It's about awareness.
So you can identify those areas where you might be overspending without even realizing it.
Exactly. Once you see those patterns, you can start making more conscious choices about where you want your money to go. It's about taking control of your finances instead of feeling like they're controlling you.
It's like shining a light on those spending habits that we often do on autopilot without thinking about it. Okay, so we've covered automating savings and tracking our spending. What about investing? That always feels like a whole other world.
It can feel that way, right? But it doesn't have to be super complicated. The source material emphasizes starting simple, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to take full advantage of your employer's 401k match if you have one. It's free money, basically. And if you're not taking advantage of it, it's like you're leaving cash on the table.
I have to admit, the whole 401k thing is a bit of a mystery to me. Could you maybe break it down for those of us who need a little investing 101?
Sure. A 401k is basically a retirement savings plan offered by a lot of employers. And that match we're talking about means that your employer will actually contribute a certain amount of money to your account based on how much you contribute yourself. It's like getting a bonus just for saving for your future.
Ah, okay. So it's almost like a guaranteed return on your investment, at least up to the amount of the match. I never thought of it that way.
It's a pretty sweet deal. A source material also mentions low-cost index funds, which can be a really good option, especially for beginner investors.
Index funds. Okay, one more time. For those of us who are still catching up, what are those?
An index fund is basically a type of mutual fund that tracks a specific market index, like the S&P 500. So instead of trying to pick individual stocks, which can be risky, you're investing in a basket of stocks that represents a broader segment of the market. It's a way to diversify your investments and potentially reduce your risk.
So it's like spreading your bets instead of putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And because index funds are passively managed, they tend to have lower fees than actively managed funds.
So lower fees and potentially lower risk. That sounds pretty appealing, especially for someone who's just starting out with investing.
It's a great way to dip your toes into the world of investing without getting overwhelmed. And remember, even small contributions can add up over time thanks to the magic of compound interest. But let's face it, we've been talking a lot about money here. And a lot of our listeners, like Sarah, who actually wrote to us, struggle with finding the time and energy for all of this. Managing finances, taking care of their health, and just trying to keep up with life's demands. It can feel like a lot.
Yeah, Sarah's question is a great segue because the source material actually addresses that very feeling of overwhelm. It encourages us to shift our focus from trying to do everything perfectly to celebrating those small wins along the way.
And it's not just about feeling good, though that's certainly a bonus. The source material actually cites research showing that those small wins can create a kind of positive feedback loop in our brains.
Really? So how does that work?
Every time we experience a success, no matter how small, our brains release dopamine. And dopamine is that feel-good chemical that's associated with pleasure and motivation. So each time we celebrate a small win, we're actually reinforcing that behavior and making it more likely that we'll repeat it.
So instead of beating ourselves up for not, overhauling our entire lives overnight, we're focusing on those small pockets of opportunity to make a difference. And those small changes can eventually lead to bigger transformations. I like that. But Sarah's question was about balancing both finances and health. What about the health side of things? What kind of small wins can we aim for there?
That's a great question, and it's one we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. So picking up where we left off, let's dive into the health side of things. The source material has some great tips here too. And again, it's all about those small, manageable changes that can make a big difference over time.
I'm all ears. Hit me with those health tips.
All right, well, one of the first things the source material highlights is the importance of scheduling workouts. And they actually recommend treating your workouts like meetings.
Okay, I have heard that one before, but sometimes even finding time for a 10-minute workout feels impossible. Life just gets in the way.
I hear you, it's not always easy. But that's why the source material emphasizes that it's more about shifting your mindset than about being rigid.
So instead of thinking, oh, I'll work out if I have time, you're actually blocking out that time in your schedule, like it's a meeting you can't miss.
Exactly. It's about making that commitment to yourself, to your well-being.
Yeah.
And look, if some days you have to shorten your workout or adjust the time, that's okay. Life happens.
The point is to honor that commitment to your health as much as possible.
Exactly. It's about building that habit, that consistency.
Okay, so scheduling workouts is key. What else?
Another big one, and this ties back to finances too, is meal prepping.
Ah, yes, the dreaded meal prep. I have tried it in the past, but honestly, I always end up getting bored with the same meals over and over again, and then I end up wasting food, which defeats the purpose.
I get it. The source material actually addresses that. They suggest thinking about meal prep in a more flexible way. Like instead of prepping the exact same meal for every single day, you can prep a base of ingredients. Things like roasted veggies, quinoa, grilled chicken, whatever you like. And then you can mix and match those ingredients throughout the week to create different meals.
So you're still saving time and money by cooking in bulk, but you're not stuck eating the same thing every day.
Right. And you're also reducing that decision fatigue that can happen at the end of a long day when you're tired and just want to order takeout.
That is so true. When I'm exhausted, my willpower goes right out the window. Okay, so we've got scheduling workouts, meal prepping. I think I know what's coming next, and I'm not sure I'm ready for it.
Sleep.
You know me too well. I already know it's important, but honestly, between work, family, and trying to have some kind of social life, sleep always seems to be the first thing to go.
I hear you. The source material acknowledges that a lot of people struggle with this, but it also emphasizes just how crucial sleep is for both our physical and mental health.
Okay, remind me why sleep is so important.
Yeah.
I know I've heard it all before, but maybe I need a refresher.
Well, for starters, not getting enough sleep can actually increase your risk of some pretty serious health problems. We're talking heart disease, stroke, diabetes, even some types of cancer.
Wow, okay. That's a pretty compelling reason to prioritize sleep. But, easier said than done. What are some realistic tips for actually getting more sleep?
Well, one thing the source material suggests is creating a consistent sleep schedule.
So going to bed and waking up around the same time each day, even on weekends.
Right. It might sound simple, but it can really help regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
So you're basically training your body to know when it's time to wind down and when it's time to wake up.
Exactly. And it's not just about the quantity of sleep, but the quality, too. The source material also suggests limiting screen time before bed. You know, that blue light from our phones and computers can actually interfere with our sleep hormones.
I have definitely noticed that if I scroll through my phone right before bed, I have a harder time falling asleep.
It can really mess with your sleep.
Yeah.
And then, you're tired the next day, which can lead to unhealthy choices, which can impact your finances. See how it all comes full circle?
It really does. Okay, so we've got scheduling workouts, meal prepping, prioritizing sleep. What about managing stress? I'm guessing that's in there somewhere too.
You know it. The source material really emphasizes the importance of taking care of our mental health, recognizing that stress can take a huge toll on both our bodies and our minds.
And our wallets, let's be real. When I'm stressed, I'm way more likely to impulse shop or splurge on takeout.
It's like our brains go into survival mode, and we're not always making the most rational decisions. So the source material suggests finding healthy ways to manage stress, and they actually highlight some really simple practices. Things like meditation, journaling, even just spending time in nature.
Okay, I like that. Those are all things that can fit into even the busiest of schedules.
Exactly. And the beauty of these practices is that they can have a ripple effect, not just on our stress levels, but on our overall well-being.
It's like those small wins we were talking about earlier. They might seem insignificant on their own, but they can create this positive momentum that can really transform our lives.
I love that. Positive momentum. That's exactly what we're going for. But I also want to acknowledge that we've thrown a lot of tips at our listeners today. It can
Mhm.
be easy to get caught up in the shoulds and start feeling overwhelmed, like, oh, I should be doing all these things, but I'm not.
That's such an important point to bring up. How does the source material address that potential for overwhelm?
It really boils down to this: progress, not perfection. There will be days when you miss a workout, order takeout, or don't get enough sleep. We're all human. The key, according to the source, is to view those moments not as failures, but as opportunities to learn and adjust.
So it's like giving yourself permission to be human, to have those off days without beating yourself up about it.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that building sustainable habits takes time and effort. It's about making those small, consistent choices day after day, week after week, and you don't have to do it all at once.
That is so important to remember. We often get caught up in this all or nothing mentality, but real change, lasting change, happens gradually. It's about those small steps forward, even if there are some stumbles along the way.
And it's about recognizing that this journey is unique for everyone. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one person might not work for another. It's about finding what resonates with you, what fits into your life, and building on those small wins.
It sounds like the source material is advocating for a more holistic approach to well-being, one that acknowledges the interconnectedness of our finances, our health, and even our mindset. It's not about compartmentalizing different aspects of our lives, but rather recognizing that they all influence each other.
And it's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize. We might not be able to control everything in our lives, but we can control our responses, our choices, and the small actions we take each day.
Which brings us back to Sarah's question about balancing it all. I'm curious, did the source material offer any specific advice tailored to her situation? She's working two jobs and really struggling to find the time for everything.
They did, and they acknowledged the very real challenges that people like Sarah face, people who are juggling multiple jobs and responsibilities. The source emphasized the importance of finding those pockets of opportunity to prioritize well-being, even amidst a busy schedule.
I'm eager to hear what they suggested. What kind of small wins can someone like Sarah focus on?
Well, they actually suggested starting really small, like super simple stuff that even someone with a crazy schedule could manage. For example, they talked about prepping overnight oats the night before.
Oh, I love overnight oats.
Right, it's so easy. So that way breakfast is ready to just grab and go in the morning, or squeezing in a quick 10-minute workout at home. There are tons of free videos online. You don't even need a gym membership.
That's perfect for someone like Sarah who's always on the go. It's all about finding those little hacks that fit into a jam-packed schedule.
Exactly. And I'm guessing they probably also reiterated the importance of automating finances, right?
They did. You know, setting up automatic transfers for savings and bills can really make a huge difference, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed and time is scarce.
It just takes that mental load off. You know things are being taken care of, even when you don't have the time or energy to think about it.
And the source material really emphasized that even those small, seemingly insignificant actions can create a ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. It's like that snowball effect. You start with something small, and it builds momentum over time.
You start to see those results, even if they're gradual. And it's almost like you're proving to yourself that you can make positive changes, even when life feels chaotic.
That's a great way to put it. That sense of self-efficacy, that belief in your ability to make things happen, that's so crucial for long-term success, both financially and in terms of your overall well-being.
You know, as we've been talking about all this, it's made me think about the bigger picture too. Like, yes, the source material focuses on these individual actions we can take, but isn't there also a societal context here? I mean, we live in a culture that kind of glorifies busyness. You know, it often feels like there's this unspoken pressure to be constantly doing, achieving, consuming.
That's a great point. I mean, it's no wonder so many of us struggle to prioritize our health and finances when we're constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we need to be doing more, buying more, being more.
It can feel almost impossible to slow down and focus on those things that actually nourish us, both physically and mentally. You know, like simple things, getting enough sleep, cooking a healthy meal, spending time in nature. Those things often end up at the bottom of the to-do list.
And that's where I think the message of the source material is so powerful, because while it acknowledges those external pressures, that fast-paced world we live in, it also offers a message of empowerment. It's like it's saying, look, the world might be crazy right now, but you have the power to navigate it, to create a life that feels good on your own terms.
That's such an important reminder. We do have more agency than we often realize.
We do.
So to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what does it all boil down to? What do we want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the key takeaway here is that you have the power to create a life that is both financially secure and, physically and mentally well. You really do.
It's not about finding some magic formula or, having superhuman willpower. It's about making small, consistent choices day after day that align with your values and your goals.
Absolutely. And celebrating those small wins, learning from those inevitable setbacks, and remembering that progress, not perfection, is the key.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Oh,
And on that note, we will leave you with one final question to ponder. What's one small step you can take this week, today even, to move closer to that vision of a balanced and thriving life? What would be your small win to celebrate?
remember, you have the power to make those choices. You have the power to create a life that feels good on all levels.
That's it for our deep dive this week. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of yourselves, your finances, and each other.